Lance Reddick, you guys are now, you just finished up the third season of Bosch. So far, it's proven to be a very popular show with critics and audiences. What was the attitude like going into the third season for you guys?
Well, I mean, by the time we started shooting the third season, we knew it was a great show. The only question was, you know, in terms of, well, first of all, we knew it was a great show, and we knew it was a popular show. We knew it was one of, if not the most popular show on Amazon in terms of numbers, even though Amazon doesn't really give out numbers. But just in terms of awards and kind of that kind of recognition, I guess we were concerned that it was still going to be just seen as another cop show. But then as we started shooting the third season and I started reading the scripts, all of us were really excited about kind of what the story was, because, you know, I think a lot of people feel that the show is a great show and it's gotten literally better every season, and the third season is the best season so far. So and now this year, Amazon seems to be doing a really huge push, not just for Titus, but for the show and for the rest of the leads in the cast as well. So it's really exciting.
Well, what were some of the ways that the show has developed since the first season, particularly with your character, Irvin Irving, which is such a great character name, by the way?
Well, you know, one of the things I knew coming into the show when I signed on to do the show, because I feel like I need to say that originally I was hesitant to do the show because you know, I'd been playing kind of a top cop on television in the series lead for 10 years in a row, two shows in a row, even though Fringe was very different from The Wire because it was a science fiction action adventure show, but I was still kind of the head of an elite unit investigating kind of super crimes. And so the thought of signing on to play yet another cop in a suit was, I was very hesitant, but because of who it came from Eric Overmyer, who I knew from The Wire, and you know, he's a famous playwright as well, and he was a producer and writer on Treme. So, and Eric's one of those people who you get a lot of empty promises in Hollywood, no matter how high up you get. But Eric's one of those people where I just knew his word was his bond, and so I knew that the second season was going to be a big story arc for me. So, you know, the way the character starts in the first season, he's a deputy commissioner, and he's all about becoming commissioner. And in the and his son is kind of trying to follow in his footsteps. His son is a young police officer on patrol, but you can tell that there's a difference with his son because his son really loves the street, and he hesitates to go against his father because, you know, my character is a very domineering personality. He loves to dominate and be in control, and he loves power. So, you know, in second season, which is based on the other thing I feel like I need to say is that each season is loosely based on at least two of the books in the Harry Bosch season. Excuse me, in the Harry Bosch series that Michael Connelly has written, and so I knew that a lot of the second season was based loosely on, now I can't remember the name of the book, where Irving's son is killed. But it was very, 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 very different in this series because in the book, his son's not even a cop, and in the book, I mean, you never even see his son. He's dead at the beginning of the book. Whereas in the show, you know, you see him go undercover to investigate these dirty cops and how it backfires, and then kind of halfway through the season, Irving has to deal with that, and it really kind of sidetracks his whole mindset of ambition, and it not only kind of destroys his his emotional life. Of course, he's lost his son, but it destroys his marriage, and it makes him completely rethink his whole wanting to get to the top. And so he comes into the third season having said at the end of the second season that he's only going to be interim chief. He's not going to accept the role of chief of police. And, you know, as we see in the third season, that may change.
Yeah. Right. You brought up the book series, which this show is based on. Had you read the books beforehand, or do you look to the books at all as like research for your character?
I did the first two seasons. I mean, the first season I actually asked Now, I thought it was on the tip of my brain, the name of the book that the storyline with Irving Sun is based on, but I lost it. But that was one of the books that Michael told me to read at the very beginning, before we started shooting the first season of the show. And but the third season I didn't. Now, ironically, one of the kind of the main storyline with kind of the special forces guys pulling the big heist, even though the way the story is construed is completely different from in the book. But it's very loosely based on the Black Echo, which was Michael's very first Harry Bosch novel, and I think that's the first Bosch novel that I read.
Okay.
Yeah. So going into this fourth season that we're going to start shooting at the end of July, I don't even know what books it's based on yet, and I haven't read those. So.
Right. Well, as far as I know, there's like 30 or 40 books in this series, so I guess you guys get a lot of material to work with.
Well, I think there are 19 Harry Bosch novels.
Okay.
But then he's also got the Lincoln Lawyer series, which is also tied loosely to Harry Bosch, because you find out in the book series that those two characters are half brothers.
Right. Okay. I thought I was inflating that number just a bit.
So, well, it may not be inflated in terms of the number of books that Michael's written, just in terms of Harry Bosch novels.
Right.
But he's still, I mean, I think his 19th one was released last year.
Right. Okay. When you initially got into the character, what were some of the traits about him that really stood out for you, and I guess differentiated him? As you say, you've played a lot of cops in your life. What were some of the traits that I guess stood out for you and differentiated him a bit?
Well, first of all, I had the good fortune to have a long meeting with Bernard C. Parks, who was the police commissioner back in the early 90s. And so I took a lot from that meeting with him in terms of the two things that really struck me about Bernard C. Parks were, first of all, he's a big guy. When I met him, which was, gosh, it was the summer of 2014, so that was 3 years ago. I mean, I think he was 70. I think he was around 70 years old at the time. He's still bigger than I am, and he is just such a commanding presence. He's trying to think of the two words that come to my mind, because it's a bit of a paradox. He's so charming, but he's so commanding at the same time. It's easy to see that all he would need to do was to flip how he interacts with you to be incredibly intimidating. And the other thing that I noticed about him was how little he had to stop to think. In other words, I would ask him a question and he would go on. Not only would he give me the answer, but he would give me examples from his career. And everything was at the tip of his brain. So that, just as you listen to me speak, I say, and I, well, a lot, none of that. It was as though every thought was right there and he could speak extemporaneously about anything. And he could, going back 30, 40, 50 years in his life, it was like it was yesterday. I mean, his memory and his focus is incredible.
Right. So then, from this season that just finished airing on Amazon, what for you were some highlights, some episodes that really stood out in your mind for your character, or particular scenes or moments?
Well, this past season, season 3, it was interesting because for me, season 3, my character is not quite as dramatic as the stuff that I had, because of course second season, of course, I lost my son, and then I ended up doing a rogue investigation with Bosch. So that's a horse of a different color. But because season 3 was so much about me kind of making the decision about what to do with my career, it's all about kind of what do I do with the rest of my life. And so, meeting John Park's character, and then starting a date again, making the decision not to leave town and to actually stay and become chief. So I think, one of the big moments for me was the scene where I actually proposed the possibility. Jen and I have coffee, and I proposed the possibility of going on a date. And the other was, and it's a small moment, but it's a moment where I'm getting ready for a date with her. And I've already signed the divorce papers, which was clearly very painful for my character. And I'm in my office and I'm at the mirror tying my tie. And I happen to notice my wedding ring, and I've still got it on. even though it's been like over a year, and I'm now officially divorced. And the moment that I make the decision to take the ring off, that was a big one for me, for my character, I think.
And within those moments, I mean, are there, obviously you're drawing from your research and from the scripts, are there personal experiences that you bring into that for this character? I mean, to kind of put yourself into it.
Well, when you say are the personal experiences that I bring into it, are you talking about kind of the dating after being in a long relationship, or are you talking about the marriage, or you just kind of in general?
In general, yes. I mean, you know, even for like moments, even when you're playing the cop, you know, I mean, because, you know, moments like that, since you're not in law enforcement, I wonder how you find your way into things like that.
Some of it is because I've never been in law enforcement. Some of it is just using my imagination and kind of trying to get into the skin of the people that I've interviewed, and the cops that I've interviewed. You know, I feel like I never really fully answered your question before about kind of what differentiates Irving from, say, Broyles or Daniels, from the characters I played in Fringe and The Wire. And for me, you know, Daniels is really, even though he was on the command track, what gets revealed about him by the end of the first season, and which is what causes the conflict with his wife and why they end up separating, is that what he's a cop at heart. What he cares about is the job more than the rank. And Broyles is really a soldier. I mean, he's kind of a Machiavellian political manipulator, at least at the beginning of the first season. But Broyles is really a soldier in a you know what I mean, an FBI cop's job. Whereas I feel like Irving is the quintessential politician. He loves the games of power, and I feel like that's what I had to kind of get my head around and find a way to get into my body when I was doing this character.
Okay. The interaction between you and Titus Welliver as Bosch is so great. What is that chemistry like between the two of you on set? What's that dynamic like?
Well, here's the thing that's interesting about that. First of all, I met Titus 20 years ago doing another show called Falcone, which is very short-lived, back in 1999. And we ran once I moved to LA back in 2000, back maybe 12 years ago, I ran into Titus maybe twice before that. Once in a video store and once in an audition. Ironically, I think it was for Fringe. Wow. And so, I mean, I didn't really know Titus that well when we started working together, but I've always been a fan of his work. And how do I put this? As personality, see, part of the problem is that who we are really as people is so different from the characters that we're playing. Is that as we've gotten to know each other, we've become really good friends.
Right.
But the truth is that as a personality, like, it's ironic that Titus is actually much more kind of dominant kind of personality than I am in real life.
Right.
And what's really wonderful for me well, I don't want to forget about it because you can't forget about it. The fact that he's such a great actor and he's so fantastic in the show. I mean, the third season, I mean, I know it's his show, but the third season, even more than any other season, it's his season. I mean, he made me cry a couple of times. But the thing that's so wonderful about him, and it takes me back to something that my acting teacher told us when we were talking about status, our first year of drama school, particularly when we were getting into Shakespeare. He said, you can't play status. The people around you have to give it to you. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about this. And there's a scene that I have with Bosch in a car in this season 3, where, I kind of catch him off guard. He's coming out of the police station. And, my driver, Wash, says, she would like to have a word with you. So he gets in the car not knowing what to expect. And we have this drive around the block several times. And I noticed how much he gave up status. His character gives up status to my character. Except when he doesn't. And when he doesn't, it's a very specific plot thing, and it's a very specific moment for his character that makes sense. And so, you know, a lot of times actors, because of ego, just won't give up status because they want to make sure that they shine on camera. But what makes the relationship work is the level of respect that his character shows to me, except when he loses it. And even then, do you know what I mean? If I push back hard enough to say respect me, he backs down.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You bring up The Wire, and I wanted to ask you about that because, well, full disclosure, it's my favorite show, and I know, I know for a lot of people that they feel the same way. That's a show, like you mentioned with Bosch earlier, how people are still discovering it in a way. The Wire is certainly an example of a show that people discovered sort of later in its run and are still discovering today, and its esteem continues to grow. How does that make you feel, knowing that you were a part of a show that is so beloved today?
It's a little, how does it make me feel? Sometimes uncomfortable, just because sometimes it's uncomfortable being the center of attention for me. But more to the point of your question, it's one of those. What was interesting about The Wire was that when we did it, we knew that it was going to be great. But I don't know if any of us knew how great it was going to be. Because the two things that I can, first of all, it's literally the only pilot I've ever read in my life where I literally said to myself, I have to be on this show. And I didn't even know what character I wanted to play. I just knew I had to be on the show. I mean, the pilot read like the first chapter of a novel. And from the time we were shooting the pilot and I was working with the other actors, I mean, everything was just so good. I mean, the other actors were so good, and it felt like being in the theater with all these great actors, except that we were like being on screen. But by the same token, our first season started when the second season of Sopranos started, and 6 Feet Under was on HBO, and Sex and the City was on. So, we were on HBO when like HBO was changing television. When HBO was like HBO was way out in front of everybody else. So we were kind of in that. So it's not like we thought our longevity was going to be any greater than anybody else's. And the other thing that was so interesting about the journey of The Wire is that as the show went on, while we were on the air, we almost got canceled twice because our numbers were low. And a lot of it was through kind of the brilliant machinations of because you want to talk about somebody who's really great at politics, even though he's also kind of a maverick. David Simon really, really did everything he could to keep that show on the air to finish telling his story. So it wasn't until the last season aired, after it was over, that people in the industry were starting to talk about it. And really, it's a thing where it's become a worldwide phenomenon purely by word of mouth. So it's the only show that I can think of that literally gets bigger the further away we get from it. And so, and it's a similar thing with kind of how it's affected our careers. I mean, Idris is kind of his own case, but for the rest of us, I can speak for myself how, the further I get from The Wire, the more it helps the more it helps my career, if you know what I mean.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned how that was a show at the time with Sopranos and 6 Feet Under. It really changed the landscape of TV today and made shows like Bosch possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Lance, thank you so much, and congratulations on another season of Bosch. It was a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.